This bill seeks to repeal 3 recently passed bills that curb the ability of citizens of New South Wales to speak and think freely. Now, I understand that it is likely there will be a parliamentary inquiry into these 3 bills, and I am pleased the opposition has signalled its intention to support that inquiry. I am, however, disappointed that the opposition has preempted what could come out of that inquiry by saying that they will not support a repeal in any case. Now, the Liberal Party's redoubtable founder, Sir Robert Menzies, would be horrified because he was a free speech warrior, and I know that the Liberal Party membership across New South Wales is overwhelmingly in favour of robust free speech, so I encourage the fine members of that party to press for a change in their party's policy as this inquiry unfolds. Now, Mr President, I've brought this bill up for debate today, but we won't be voting on it until after the inquiry has concluded. The knee-jerk and panicked anti-speech legislation should never have been rushed through this parliament. Unfortunately, while a handful of crossbenchers attempted to push back, the Liberal-Labor coalition won the day, and another freedom was sacrificed on the altar of false security. But the fight is not over. Free speech is too important for us to meekly accept defeat. Free speech is not simply one freedom among many, but it is the core foundational freedom upon which a free society can be built. It is essential for free thinking, independence and a proper democracy. The Libertarian Party will do everything we can to support free speech, starting with repealing these most recent anti-speech laws and then going further to unwind all speech restrictions and enshrine free speech in the New South Wales Constitution and at some point the Commonwealth Constitution. Now, the Premier has said that free speech is not compatible with a multicultural society. Mr President, this wasn't a slip of the tongue. The Premier has said this on multiple occasions. I don't think he realises what he is saying. If multiculturalism is too fragile to sustain disagreement or criticism, that does not mean we should ban disagreement. It means that multiculturalism is failing. The Premier's willingness to sacrifice core Western values so quickly is shocking and disappointing. Now, the government justified their anti-free speech laws as a response to anti-Semitism. This argument fails at a number of levels. First, anti-Semitism is not caused by too much free speech, and so it cannot be solved by taking away free speech. Indeed, the laws themselves may actually incite more anti-Semitism. Second, while I think ethnic hatred is both cruel and dumb, it is not a legitimate role of this government to control how people think or feel. Thoughts or feelings should never be illegal to say aloud, even when we strongly disagree with them. And finally, it turns out that the supposed spate of anti-Semitic attacks used to justify the anti-speech laws were not actually motivated by anti-Semitism. The laws were built on an exaggerated fear campaign that was based on a hoax. Now, based on media reports, Mr President, it seems clear that the perpetrator of this hoax, who was overseas, who's a fugitive from the law, is himself an anti-Semite. It has been published in The Australian. He has on multiple occasions said things. But he clearly, his motivation was to negotiate a reduced sentence for the crimes that he has been found guilty of. We had a spate of anti-Semitic attacks for 2 or 3 months over the summer. They came out of nowhere and now they've stopped. There was this spike. It was caused by this perpetrator. So the motivation was not anti-Semitism. Now, he was capitalising on the fevered pitch of hysteria, and he thought, look, the best way for me to get attention and to look like I'm helping the police by tipping them off about terrorism is to exploit this cause. Now, I want to be clear, the Libertarian Party would be fighting against these anti-speech laws regardless of whether the caravan bomb was genuine or not. We were against these laws even at the height of the moral panic, and our position hasn't changed. What has changed is that the government's fig leaf of an excuse has now crumbled. The caravan hoax was a mask-off moment for the government. They have been shown to engage in an exaggerated fear campaign to justify more power to the government and less freedom for the people, rushed through Parliament with insufficient security. And can I say, Mr President, I've been here for almost 2 years. On 2 occasions this government has made us sit till almost dawn, And on both occasions, the first one was related to transgender issues, the second one was about free speech. The government wants to rush it through because they don't want scrutiny, they don't want parliamentary scrutiny, and they don't want the public to know. So we know from my limited time here, I can see that when the government wants to do something that they are ashamed of, they slam it through as quickly as possible, then they just want to move on. Well, on this occasion, our reality has caught up for them. This is actually similar to the weapons of mass destruction moment, when we were told we have to go and launch regime change wars in the Middle East because of the imminent threat of weapons of mass destruction. But then it turned out there were no weapons of mass destruction. It was all just made up. They just wanted the war. And that's a similar thing where we are now. They just wanted to restrict free speech, and the caravan plot, the caravan hoax, was just their excuse to bring it about. And now they're doubling down. And pride is making them double down. The Premier should be saying, yes, we made an error, we will reverse it, we will support the Libertarian Party's repeal bill, but they're doubling down because of pride and reputation. And that is not a good way to run the government, Mr. President. Fear is the lifeblood of government power. As a consequence, governments throughout the ages have often repeated the time-honoured tactic of taking a real concern, exaggerating it out of all proportion, and using the subsequent fear to justify more money and more power for the government. Libertarians have always fought against this tactic, but the sad truth is that it often works. Global warming is a very good example of that. COVID is another example. The government gets a fear, whips it up, exaggerates it, brings in new laws, makes the government more powerful. Now, sometimes these fear campaigns are exposed, showing that our political emperors have no clothes. This is one such occasion. Fear and panicked overreactions are not the basis for good public policy, and now that the exaggerated fear campaign has been exposed, this Parliament should take the opportunity to change direction and support this repeal bill. The government rushed through 3 anti-speech bills, and the Libertarian Party repeal bill aims to remove all 3. First, the Crimes Legislation Amendment, Racial and Religious Hatred Bill, strengthened the laws against thought crime and Nazi symbols. At best, this law is redundant and irrelevant. It will certainly be ineffective, but there is a risk that it takes us further down the path of criminalising unpopular speech and entrenching thought crimes in our legal system. The second bill was the Crimes Amendment Places of Worship Bill, which gives the police more power to disperse unapproved protest. Once again, this law is either redundant or dangerous. Police already have all the power they need to manage protests and prevent trespass. It is worth remembering that free people should not require approval from a government before they are allowed to protest against the government. Even worse, the bill forbids protests near places of worship, but lacks any definition of what near means, but instead allows an individual police officer to make up their own mind. Sydney CBD is full of places of worship. There's a church straight across the road from here, Mr. President. We often have protests out the front of there. Sydney CBD is full of places of worship, and with this loose definition of near, we are effectively prohibiting protest in the heart of our great city. Finally, the Crimes Amendment Inciting Racial Hatred Bill is by far the worst of the 3 by criminalising speech that potentially incites an emotion. This law is basically 18C on steroids, threatening people with jail if they talk the wrong way about racial issues or transgender issues. The government likes to talk about finding a balance between free speech and the supposed right to not be offended. But it is noteworthy that their version of balance always moves in only one direction, and that direction is narrowing free speech and increasing government control. Libertarians believe that racism is wrong, but the argument for free speech is valid even when some people are saying things that we strongly oppose. Indeed, it is the only time the principle is relevant. It is absurd to claim that free speech only means the right to say things that are pre-approved by the government and endorsed by the majority. Policing our speech is little different to policing our thoughts, since speaking is often the way that people wrestle with ideas. We must retain our right to think freely about controversial topics, and that right must extend to people we think are wrong. The only alternative, Mr. President, is a government with dangerous power over the public discourse and dissident thinkers being pushed underground or made into martyrs. All three laws should be repealed. The Libertarian Party would have been against these free speech laws in any scenario due to our total commitment to free speech, but recent events have strengthened our argument. The revelations that the caravan bomb and other incidences were criminal con jobs have undermined the government's rationale for these laws. The cynical political ploy of using exaggerated fear campaigns to rush through more government power has been revealed and should now be utterly rejected. Thank you.